At the edge of night, when the sky has dimmed into a deep and patient blue, a silver river moves without urgency. It does not hurry toward the sea. It does not strain against its banks. It glides, as it has always glided, beneath a veil of starlight. Its surface is smooth as a held breath, reflecting constellations that once shone upon another world, a world of kiln-fired brick and quiet symmetry. It is said that 5,000 years ago, along these patient waters, cities rose not in defiance of the earth, but in gentle agreement with it. Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, names we speak now in softened tones, as if they belong to a hymn half-remembered. Their bricks, baked beneath ancient suns, still rest upon one another with careful intention. Their streets stretch in straight lines, aligned as though guided by an invisible geometry, a sacred measure whispered between stone and sky. Who were the people who built such places? Who traced their cities with such calm precision, yet carved no towering kings into monument? There are no grand statues declaring conquest, no colossal faces staring out across time. Only walls and wells, courtyards and chambers, spaces shaped for living rather than display. Beneath the silence of the present, we drift into those streets as they might have been under moonlight. The air cool, touched by the scent of clay and distant water. Footsteps echo softly against brick. In narrow lanes, homes stand side by side, equal in height, modest in ornament. Doors open into courtyards where lanterns once glowed like small captive stars. It is said that in these courtyards, families gathered at dusk. That grain, stored carefully in raised chambers, rested like sunlight made solid. That wells descended deep into the earth, spiraling down into cool darkness where water waited in shadow. Even now, those wells remain, stone rings worn smooth by hands long returned to dust. There was order here, but it did not shout. Drainage channels ran beneath the streets, hidden yet precise, carrying away what was no longer needed. Public baths, vast and solemn, lay sunken in brick-lined chambers. Some believe these baths were places of ritual cleansing, where bodies entered water not only to wash away dust, but to release the unseen burdens of the day. Others suggest they were civic spaces, shared without hierarchy, where the community gathered in quiet accord. Yet nowhere do we find the face of a ruler etched in stone. No throne room stands at the city's heart. The absence feels intentional, almost sacred. It is as if power flowed here like water, diffused, unseen, shared among many rather than claimed by one. Whispers tell us of artisans seated cross-legged in shaded workshops, carving seals from steatite with patient hands. Small, square, deliberate. Upon them, animals emerge, unicorns poised in stillness, bulls heavy with strength, elephants marked by memory. Above each creature a row of symbols presses gently into clay, a script as brief as breath. That script remains undeciphered. Scholars have traced its curves, compared its signs, searched for echoes in living tongues, yet it remains veiled, as though the past chose to speak in a language not meant to be hurried into translation. It is said that these symbols were once pressed into damp clay to mark goods for trade, to seal jars of grain, to identify merchants whose names we will never know. And still, the script does not yield. Perhaps it was never meant to be conquered by analysis. Perhaps it is less a code and more a reminder that some knowledge rests beyond our insistence. Beneath museum glass and desert sky alike, the seals remain small and resolute, their animal guardians watching in silence. The cities themselves were aligned with quiet intention. From above, their streets form a grid, straight avenues crossing at right angles, as though drawn by an unseen hand, guided by celestial rhythm. Standardized bricks, uniform in proportion, suggest a shared measure, a collective agreement on how space should unfold. It is tempting to imagine a hidden architect, a singular mind behind such harmony. Yet no record names them. No inscription claims authorship. In forgotten corners of the earth, some civilizations built monuments to endure the ages. Here, it seems, endurance was expressed differently, not in towering temples, but in wells placed where every household could reach water, not in pyramids, but in drainage systems that carried away what must not remain. There is a tenderness in such practicality, a reverence for daily life. And then, something shifted. Some believe drought came first, a slow thinning of rain, a subtle change in wind. Rivers that once swelled with monsoon breath may have begun to withdraw, their currents slipping from familiar channels. Satellite images now reveal ghostly riverbeds beneath desert sand, traces of waters that once nourished fields and filled wells. Others whisper of trade routes fading, of distant partners turning their ships elsewhere. Clay tablets found far from the Indus speak of a land called Meluha, perhaps this valley, perhaps another. Goods once travelled across oceanic expanse, beads of carnelian glowing like embers, woods fragrant and rare. Then the currents shifted and the sea fell quiet. Yet there is no layer of ash marking catastrophe, no shattered gates, no walls blackened by flame. The bricks remain upright. The wells stand open. Streets stretch on beneath open sky. It is said that the people did not fall in a single night. They walked away. Gradually, settlements grew smaller. Populations drifted eastward, following water where it flowed. The great cities thinned, not in violence, but in retreat. Families gathered what they could carry, seeds, tools, memory, and stepped beyond the grid of brick into fields and villages that would become something new. How can a civilization so carefully built dissolve without a cry? The contradiction lingers like mist above water at dawn. We expect endings to arrive with spectacle, with collapse and flame. Yet here we encounter something gentler, a soft erasure, a choice perhaps to become smaller rather than to shatter. Where memory fades, the earth absorbs. Tonight, the river continues its slow movement. The Indus glides beneath a sky thick with stars, just as it did when those cities were young. Its waters carry silt from distant mountains, smoothing stone with patient touch. In the soft collision of current against brick, there is a sound, low, rhythmic, almost like a voice. Perhaps the river remembers their true names, not the names we have given them, Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, but the names spoken between parents and children, whispered in courtyards at dusk, names pressed into clay seals and carried across sea wind, names never carved into monuments, yet alive for a time in breath. Beneath the silence of the ruins, the wells still descend into cool darkness. The great bath reflects only sky. Seals rest beneath glass, their script unread. Streets remain aligned with invisible order, open to wind and wandering goats. The cities sleep. Some believe they are not entirely gone, only transformed, their people merging into other cultures, their knowledge diffused like water into wider lands. The bricks crumble slowly, returning to dust. The script waits, patient as stone. Perhaps it was never meant to be solved. Perhaps it was meant to remind us that not all stories demand closure, that some civilizations end not with conquest, but with quiet dispersal into the greater human current. The river moves on, silver and unhurried. It carries memory without burden. It holds echoes without insisting they be understood. And as the night deepens, the stars reflect upon its surface once more, ancient, watchful, unchanged. We stand at its bank in imagination, listening. The water breathes against stone, the cities rest beneath open sky. And somewhere, beneath the flowing current, beneath layers of silt and time, the river keeps their names, spoken softly, endlessly, where memory fades into the sacred whole. Beneath a thin wash of lantern light, a small steatite seal rests in the palm of the imagination. The stone is cool, almost tender in its stillness. Its surface has been smoothed by hands long returned to dust. Upon it, an animal stands in profile. Perhaps a bull, perhaps a creature that once walked only in the realm between memory and myth. Above its back, a short row of symbols curves like a whisper caught in clay. It is said that these marks were pressed 5,000 years ago into wet earth, into jars of grain, into parcels bound for distant shores. They were carried through markets scented with spice and river wind. They travelled across salt water beneath constellations no longer named the same, and yet we cannot hear them. No scholar has fully understood what they say. No patient deciphering has opened their gate. The script remains veiled, deliberate, composed, silent. What did they write, and why does it remain closed to us? The question is not asked loudly. It does not demand. It lingers, like incense rising in a darkened chamber. In forgotten corners of the earth, language once grew not only from necessity, but from devotion. The people of the Indus Valley, whose cities rose in brick along the patient river, carved these signs in brief sequences. They did not compose long epics upon stone. They did not chisel declarations of empire into cliff face. Instead, they left compact murmurs, short inscriptions, a handful of symbols above a waiting animal. The brevity itself feels intentional. Imagine a workshop at dusk, a low table of wood, a small lamp flickering in patient rhythm. An artisan sits cross-legged, a piece of steatite between careful fingers. Outside, the river breathes against its banks. Within, the room is filled with dust and quiet. The artisan carves a spiral, a trident shape, a curve that resembles a fish or a leaf. Each incision is deliberate, shallow yet precise. There is no haste. The symbols are not ornamental. They belong to a shared system, repeated across seals found in cities hundreds of miles apart. It is said that thousands of these seals have been uncovered, from Harappa, from Mohenjo-Daro, from Lothal by the sea, each bearing animals poised in sacred stillness, the unicorn with its singular horn, the humped bull, the elephant marked by ancient memory. Above them, the script waits. Some believe the signs record names of merchants, of clans, of goods destined for trade. Others whisper that the script was not merely practical, but sacred, that the symbols carried identity beyond commerce, that they marked belonging, alignment, perhaps even invocation. And still, the silence remains. Unlike other ancient scripts, those that unfolded into stories of kings and gods, this one resists translation. It does not stretch across stone in lengthy proclamation. It appears in short sequences, rarely more than a handful of signs. It offers no bilingual key, no Rosetta Stone pressed into our grasp. Scholars have compared its patterns to Dravidian languages, to lost tongues, to symbolic codes beyond speech. Some suggest it hides a language unrelated to any living one, a branch severed from the tree of words. Others wonder if it was never meant to be spoken aloud at all. Perhaps it was a sacred shorthand, a system of signs understood intuitively by those who shared its rhythm. Whispers tell us that not all scripts are meant to be read in the way we read now. Some are meant to be recognized, like a seal pressed into clay that affirms, "This is ours, this belongs." Beneath museum glass, these seals sit in quiet defiance of time. Their surfaces are cracked but composed. Their animals remain poised, neither advancing nor retreating. The symbols above them hold their shape with unyielding calm. Centuries of scrutiny have passed over them like wind across stone. The silence surrounding the script feels intentional, almost protective, as though the past chose not to be translated too quickly, as though the language withdrew behind a veil when the cities themselves dissolved into dust. It is tempting to imagine a moment when the script was still alive, when a merchant pressed his seal into damp clay, sealing a jar of grain, when a child traced the carved symbols with curious fingers, when the marks were not mysterious, but ordinary, known. Perhaps they were spoken softly, Perhaps they were never voiced at all. In the marketplaces of those ancient cities, goods were exchanged without spectacle. Carnelian beads glowing like embers, fine cotton textiles, shell bangles from distant shores. Each object might have borne the impression of a seal, a quiet signature of origin. Yet even there, no grand inscription boasted of conquest or divine favor. The Indus script remains modest, compact, contained. There is tenderness in such restraint. Where other civilizations carved their triumph into towering monuments, this one pressed its language into objects small enough to rest in a palm. Its script was intimate, portable, perhaps even personal. Some believe that this brevity hints at a deeper philosophy, that the people of the Indus valued balance over declaration, order over dominance, that their script mirrored their cities, measured, aligned, without excess. And yet, we do not know. We stand outside its gate, listening. In forgotten corners of the earth, time has a way of softening meaning. Rivers shift course, trade winds fall silent, cities thin and disperse. When the Indus civilization gradually receded, not in flames but in quiet migration, its script may have receded with it. Without continuous use, language grows faint. Without voices to carry it forward, signs become symbols without sound. Where memory fades, mystery begins. There is a certain humility in this unbroken code. It resists our insistence on clarity. It reminds us that not all knowledge yields to analysis, that some truths rest behind veils, not out of defiance, but out of rhythm, waiting for the right alignment of listener and silence. At night, beneath star-marked skies, the seals might seem less like puzzles and more like talismans. Their animals glow softly in imagined moonlight. The script above them appears less as text and more as pattern, repeating shapes like constellations in clay. Perhaps the symbols were never meant to be solved, only witnessed. Perhaps they functioned as echoes, marks of belonging that required no translation among those who shared them. The mind searches for meaning, for phonetic values, for syntax. But the heart senses something quieter, the possibility that language does not always serve to explain. Sometimes it serves to align, to remind, to seal intention. As centuries turned beyond the valley's brick streets, the script remained fixed in its brief sequences. It did not evolve into longer forms. It did not leave behind volumes of scrolls. It simply stopped. The last seal was pressed into clay. The last artisan carved his final symbol. The last merchant carried his mark to market, and then, like the cities themselves, the script entered a long sleep. Now it rests beneath glass and desert sky alike, unchanged by our curiosity, unmoved by our attempts to coax sound from its shape. As night deepens, the lantern light dims. The steatite seal grows still in the palm of imagination. Its carved lines soften into shadow. The animal's form merges with the darkness. The symbols above it become less like letters and more like distant stars. It is said that some languages are not lost, only withdrawn. Perhaps the script of the Indus waits for a listener who understands that silence can be its own form of speech. That meaning does not always reside in translation. That mystery is not an absence, but a presence veiled. Beneath the silence, the script continues to exist, not as sound, but as echo, not as explanation, but as invitation. We cannot hear it, and yet it remains. The seal cools in the dark. Dust settles softly across its surface. The river beyond the ancient cities moves in its endless rhythm. And somewhere between symbol and star, between clay and breath, the script rests, patient as stone, veiled as night, waiting perhaps not to be solved, but simply to be held in quiet wonder. In the hush before dawn, when the sky is neither night nor morning, but a soft breath suspended between, we descend. A narrow stair of brick curves downward into the earth. Each step is worn smooth, edges rounded by hands and heels long vanished. The air cools as we move below the surface, and the world above, with its wind and wandering dust, fades into silence. At the base of the stair, a well opens like a dark eye. Water glimmers far below, faintly luminous, as if it has captured a fragment of moonlight and chosen to keep it. The surface does not stir. It waits. It has been waiting for thousands of years. It is said that in the cities of the Indus, in Mohenjo-daro, in Harappa, in places whose names have softened into dust, wells were everywhere. Not one or two set apart in grand courtyards, but many, intimate, hidden in homes, tucked along silent streets, built into the very fabric of daily life. This was a city of wells beneath a quiet sky. Beneath the silence of the present, we wander upward again, emerging into a neighborhood shaped by careful intention. The streets stretch in straight lines, intersecting at gentle angles. The bricks are uniform, measured, aligned. There is no chaos in their arrangement, no hurried construction. Each house, it seems, had access to water. In forgotten corners of the earth, such access was rare, reserved for temples or rulers. Yet here, the well does not belong to a king. It belongs to the household, to the courtyard, to the rhythm of ordinary breath. There are no towering palaces casting long shadows over smaller dwellings, no grand temples rising above the rooftops in solemn dominance. The skyline is low, level, almost humble. The equality of structure feels intentional, as if balance itself were sacred. It is said that archaeologists have searched these ruins for signs of centralized power, for a throne room, for a colossal statue bearing the face of a ruler, for inscriptions proclaiming lineage and conquest. They have found none. The absence becomes its own mystery. Was authority diffused like water through stone? Did governance flow unseen, subtle and necessary, like the quiet current beneath the surface of a well? Some believe the Indus cities were guided not by a single crowned figure, but by a shared understanding, a collective rhythm that shaped streets and wells alike. Beneath the silence, we imagine families moving through these spaces at dusk. The day's heat has softened. The sky above the flat rooftops deepens into violet. A woman descends the brick stair into the cool chamber of the well. Her footsteps echo softly against stone. She lowers a clay vessel, rope sliding through her fingers in patient spiral. The vessel touches water with a quiet sound, not a splash, but a greeting. She draws it upward, muscles steady, breath slow. Above, a child waits with bare feet on warm brick. The air carries the scent of earth and distant river. Neighbors pass in the street beyond, their voices low, respectful of the hour. Water was survival here. But perhaps it was more than that. Some believe the wells were also chambers of ritual, that descending into the earth to meet water was a sacred act, a daily return to the hidden source. The brick-lined shaft, spiraling downward, resembles a path inward, towards something deeper than thirst. In one city, a great bath lay sunken at the heart of the settlement, its walls sealed with bitumen, its steps descending into a broad, solemn pool. But even beyond this communal chamber, wells stood in quiet repetition, each one a private descent into shadow. It is said that the Indus people mastered the art of water management. Drainage channels ran beneath the streets, hidden but precise, carrying away what was no longer needed. Waste was guided gently out of sight. Cleanliness was not spectacle, it was structure. Such care suggests a reverence for balance. We drift through the grid of streets again, noticing how each block mirrors the next in proportion. Homes open into courtyards. Courtyards hold wells or led to them. The city feels less like a monument to power and more like a woven fabric, each thread supporting the other. No single structure dominates. Where memory fades, we are left with geometry and brick. Yet within that geometry something breathes. The well at the center of a home becomes a place of gathering. At dawn, at dusk, vessels are filled. News is exchanged in murmurs. Laughter rises, then softens. The well listens. It holds not only water, but echo. Then, slowly, something changes. Some believe the rivers shifted their course, withdrawing from familiar banks. Others whisper of drought, of monsoons thinning, of fields cracking under a sun less generous than before. Trade routes may have quieted. The sea may have carried fewer ships, but there is no layer of ash here, no shattered walls. Instead, there is thinning. The rope grows frayed and is not replaced. The bucket rests against brick a little longer each day. Footsteps become less frequent on the stair. It is said that the people did not flee in panic. They dispersed gently, following water where it flowed more faithfully. Villages grew elsewhere. The great cities softened. We descend once more into the well, this time alone. The stair is empty. The air is cool, undisturbed. At the base, water still glimmers, though perhaps lower than before. The surface reflects a fragment of sky, visible through the circular opening far above. No voices echo now. The bricks remain intact. The shaft does not collapse. It simply waits. There is something deeply human in this quiet abandonment. No dramatic fall, only a fading. Some believe that the Indus civilization did not collapse so much as transform, its people merging into smaller settlements, carrying knowledge in their hands rather than in monuments. The wells, once essential, were left open to sky and rain. Centuries pass. Dust gathers along the stair. Wind carries sand into the courtyard. The well fills slowly with shadow, and yet it remains open, a circular eye gazing upward. Marked by the moon, it reflects stars that once shone on living faces. Perhaps the city was never meant to conquer time, only to dwell within it for a while. Perhaps its quiet geometry, its countless wells, were expressions not of permanence, but of presence. In forgotten corners of the earth, there are places where authority is not carved into stone, but diffused like breath, where power does not tower, but circulates gently, as water circulates through brick-lined channels. The Indus cities seem to whisper such a philosophy. Beneath the silence, the well still holds rain when it falls. It collects shadow at dusk. It listens to the wind that moves across its opening. It has outlived the voices that once leaned over its rim. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. As night deepens, we imagine the well as it is now, a quiet shaft of brick descending into cool darkness. The sky above is vast, star-marked, indifferent and kind. The circular opening frames a small portion of the cosmos, as if the well were an observatory turned inward. Water rests at the bottom, patient as stone. It reflects whatever light arrives without insisting on understanding it. Perhaps the city of wells was never meant to be a spectacle of empire. Perhaps it was a meditation in brick, a lesson in shared access, in measured living, in balance between surface and depth. The stair remains, the water waits. And somewhere between the cool chamber below and the quiet sky above, the memory of that civilization lingers, not as a throne or a statue, but as a well open to the stars. We stand at its edge in imagination, looking down. The water glimmers faintly, like captured moonlight. It does not answer, it simply holds. And the sky looks down in return, vast and silent, as if both water and star understand something we are only beginning to feel, that dwelling gently within time may be its own form of eternity. At the center of a crumbled city, beneath a sky washed in silver light, there lies a sunken chamber of stone. It is said that when the moon rises high above the plains of the Indus, its pale glow settles gently into this hollowed space, as though it remembers the shape of water that once rested there. The bricks, tight-fitted and patient, hold their alignment even now. Their edges are softened by centuries, yet their intention remains unbroken. We descend. A flight of steps, worn and measured, leads downward into the great bath of Mohenjo-daro. Each step carries the echo of bare feet that once touched it in ritual slowness. The air cools as we move below the surface of the earth. The sounds of wind and distant dust fade. What remains is stillness. Imagine the pool filled, water gathered in the chamber, dark and reflective, its surface smooth as a held breath. No ripple disturbs it, no voice breaks its quiet. It waits, as though awaiting footsteps that will never return. In forgotten corners of the earth, sacred architecture does not announce itself with towering height. It sinks inward. It draws the body down toward shadow and reflection. The great bath is not raised to the sky. It is set into the earth, cradled by brick, sealed by bitumen, embraced by surrounding rooms like silent attendants. We trace the construction slowly, as if our fingers were moving across the surface of a map carved in clay. The bricks are precise, standardized, placed with an attention that suggests devotion rather than haste. Bitumen lines the walls, ensuring that water once held here did not seep into the surrounding soil. The builders understood containment, how to cradle water without letting it escape. Some believe this chamber was ceremonial, that bodies entered the pool not merely to wash away dust from the day's labor, but to release something less visible, the burdens that gather unseen in the folds of thought. The act of descending into water may have been less about cleanliness and more about alignment. Others suggest civic gatherings unfolded here, collective immersions under a star-marked sky. Perhaps elders stood at the edge, while others stepped into the cool embrace of the pool. Perhaps silence was observed, broken only by the faint echo of water against brick. Yet no inscription tells us. No mural adorns the walls with instruction. No carved tablet explains the rite. The great bath endures without confession. It is said that the Indus cities were marked by order and quiet precision, streets aligned in grids, drainage channels hidden beneath the surface, wells descending in spiral into cool darkness. The bath stands at the heart of this geometry, not as spectacle, but as center. It does not dominate the skyline. It does not proclaim conquest. It simply exists, solemn, contained, receptive. Imagine twilight in that ancient city. The sun lowers itself without ceremony. The sky turns copper, then deepens into indigo. Lanterns flicker in distant courtyards. The air cools, carrying the scent of earth and distant river. A small gathering approaches the bath. Footsteps soften as they descend the brick stairs. The pool is full, its surface reflecting the first stars. One by one they step into the water. The sound is gentle, a low hush, as if the chamber itself inhales. Water touches skin. Breath slows. In this imagined scene, no priest raises a voice. No elaborate costume marks hierarchy. The ritual, if it is one, feels intimate, personal, shared in quiet rather than spectacle. Beneath the silence, something shifts. The water may have been cool against warm flesh, drawing heat away, settling the body into presence. Perhaps hands cupped water and poured it over head and shoulders. Perhaps eyes closed. Perhaps the stars above were framed by the open sky beyond the chamber's edge. It is said that water remembers, that it carries within it the echo of touch, of whispered intention. The great bath, if filled night after night, would have held countless such echoes, grief released, vows unspoken, fatigue softened into calm. And yet, we do not know. The absence of explanation deepens the mystery. It leaves space for reverence rather than certainty. Some archaeologists speak of civic function, of structured ritual reinforcing social cohesion. Others see symbolic purification, a cleansing before communal decision or seasonal observance. The truth rests veiled, patient as stone. Centuries pass. The water is no longer replenished. The chamber empties. Wind moves through the open spaces of the city, carrying sand in quiet spirals. The surface of the pool grows dry. Dust gathers where water once shimmered. The symmetry remains. Even without water, the bath holds its shape with solemn dignity. The descending steps still lead downward. The surrounding rooms still stand as silent witnesses. The bitumen-sealed walls, though cracked, retain the memory of containment. Where memory fades, intention lingers. The people who built this chamber valued water deeply. In a land shaped by monsoon and river, water was life, it was survival. But here, in this carefully constructed pool, water seems to have been more than necessity. It was sacred, not sacred in proclamation, but sacred in presence. In forgotten corners of the earth, there are places where cleansing is not merely physical, it is symbolic, an acknowledgement that dust gathers not only on skin, but within the unseen chambers of thought and feeling. The Great Bath may have been such a place, or perhaps it was simply a communal reservoir, designed with elegance and care. The mind reaches for explanation, the heart lingers in wonder. Now, beneath imagined moonlight, the chamber lies open to the sky. There is no water in it, at least not in the present. Only shadow pools along the floor. The bricks glow pale under the touch of night. The steps descend into darkness that no longer reflects. And yet, if you look long enough, you may almost see it. The surface of water returned in memory, a thin sheen of silver where moonlight gathers, a ripple that was once a hand entering slowly. The bath reflects only the sky now. Stars appear where bodies once stood. Constellations drift across its empty basin. The chamber has become a mirror, not of water, but of time. It is said that whatever ceremonies once unfolded here have dissolved into quiet. The voices that may have echoed against these walls are long returned to dust. The water that once filled this space has joined the river, then the oceanic expanse beyond. The structure endures. Perhaps it was never meant to be understood fully. Perhaps its purpose was not to be declared, but to be experienced, in the cool descent, in the gentle immersion, in the shared silence of those who stepped within. As night deepens, the Great Bath keeps its cool breath. The air within its sunken chamber feels different, heavier with stillness, lighter with absence. We stand at its edge in imagination, looking down. The emptiness does not accuse, it does not explain. It simply holds, and in that holding a quiet insight begins to settle, that cleansing may have been less about the body and more about the unseen currents within. That water, contained and released, mirrored the inner tides of those who entered. Perhaps the bath was a place where one descended not only into water, but into self, where dust of the world was allowed to drift away, where breath slowed enough to hear its own echo. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. The Great Bath remains, ancient, sacred, veiled, marked by the moon, open to the sky. Its purpose is not written in stone. Its rites are not carved into brick. They live only in the quiet geometry of its design and in the imagination of those who stand before it now. Perhaps it was never meant to be solved. Perhaps it was meant to remind us that beneath the noise of cities, beneath the rise and fall of civilizations, there is always a chamber waiting, a place where water once rested, where silence gathered, where we may descend for a while and return changed. The wind moves softly across the ruins. Dust drifts in slow spirals. The bath breathes its cool breath into the night, and above, the stars keep their patient watch, reflected not in water, but in the stillness of stone. Under a pale and tender dawn, when the horizon is still veiled in mist and the sea breathes in long oceanic sighs, a ship loosens itself from the shore. Its hull is dark against the softening sky. Ropes are drawn in. A final knot is secured with patient hands. The tide, neither hurried nor hesitant, gathers the vessel into its quiet embrace. It is said that from the ports of the Indus, from places where river met saltwater in gentle convergence, ships once slipped into the wider sea, carrying more than goods. They carried intention. They carried whispers of distant lands. They carried the silent geometry of a civilization that left behind no boastful record of its reach. Imagine the shoreline before sunrise. The air is cool. The river behind the port glows faintly in silver light. Mud brick warehouses rest in shadow. Along the docks, small bundles wait to be lifted. Carnelian beads the color of embers, shells smoothed by tide, fine cotton folded like captured cloud, woods fragrant and rare. Merchants move quietly. There is no proclamation, no trumpet announcing departure, only the creak of wood, the murmur of rope, the soft slap of water against hull. In forgotten corners of the earth, there are civilizations that expand by conquest, carving their names into conquered stone. And there are others who move through the world like a tide, touching, exchanging, retreating without claim. The merchants of the Indus seem to have belonged to the latter. Clay tablets found far away in the ancient lands of Mesopotamia speak of a place called Meluha, a land across the sea, a source of bright stones and dark woods, a place whose people arrived in foreign ports bearing seals and goods unfamiliar yet desired. Meluha. Perhaps this was the Indus realm. Perhaps it was another name for the valley whose script we cannot yet hear. The tablets do not explain. They simply mention the place as if it were known. Whispers tell us that ships from the Indus sailed westward across the Arabian Sea, guided by stars that shimmered like silent companions. They did not navigate with maps as we do now, but with memory of wind and current, with the taste of salt upon air, with the subtle change in the rhythm of waves against wood. At night, under a sky thick with constellations, the sailors would look upward. The stars wheeled slowly above them, celestial markers etched into darkness. The sea beneath reflected fragments of that light, turning the vessel into a small bridge between sky and water. Trade flowed gently. Objects passed from hand to hand like stories shared in low voices. A bead carved in the Indus found its way to a wrist in Mesopotamia. A cylinder seal from Sumer rested on a table beside carnelian shaped by Indus artisans. In exchange, metals and ideas moved eastward, carried by wind and trust. There are no surviving scrolls from the Indus proclaiming dominion over distant lands, no carved reliefs depicting triumph at sea. Their presence abroad is marked only by scattered seals and shared goods, small proofs of connection, like driftwood on a shore. It is said that these merchants traveled without monuments. Their ships were not floating fortresses. They were vessels of exchange. They bore no armies, only goods wrapped in woven cloth and sealed with quiet marks. Imagine the port at dusk. The returning ship appears on the horizon, its sail a pale triangle against deepening blue. On the dock, families wait. Children peer into distance. The vessel approaches slowly, tide guiding it inward. When it docks, there is no spectacle, only relief, embrace, the unloading of goods that will move through markets and courtyards. In those markets, beads of carnelian glow in lamplight like captured fire. Shell bangles rest beside clay vessels, the seals pressed into damp clay affirm origin, not dominance. And yet, beneath the silence, something shifts. Some believe that climate began to alter the patterns of wind and water, that monsoon rhythms changed, becoming less predictable, that rivers feeding the ports withdrew from their ancient beds. Others whisper of currents turning hostile, of storms that grew more frequent, of harbors slowly silting. Trade is a fragile thread stretched across oceanic distance. Perhaps trust thinned between lands. Perhaps political tides shifted in Mesopotamia, redirecting attention elsewhere. The evidence is fragmentary, like shards of pottery unearthed in distant soil, like a single seal found far from its birthplace. The long-distance routes thinned. Ships departed less often. The docks grew quieter. Warehouses echoed with emptiness. The shoreline that once hummed with quiet industry returned to stillness. There is no record of a final voyage. No inscription marking the end of exchange. Only the gradual absence of Indus goods in distant lands. The name Meluha fades from tablets. Where memory fades, the sea continues. It is said that the ocean holds no resentment. Waves erase footprints without anger. Tides swallow the marks of hull and oar. The horizon remains open, indifferent to the rise and fall of ports. Centuries pass. The ships of the Indus are gone. Their hulls have long dissolved into water and time. Their ropes have frayed. Their sails have turned to dust. Yet in museums, beneath soft light, beads of carnelian still glow. Small, precise, luminous. They were shaped by hands that once stood at the water's edge, watching ships depart beneath a pale dawn. The merchants' names are lost. No scroll preserves their biographies. No monument carries their likeness. They moved through history as quietly as the tide, touching distant shores, then receding. Some believe their true legacy was movement itself, not conquest, not empire, but connection. In forgotten corners of the earth there are people whose stories are not told in grand narrative arcs, but in subtle exchanges, a bead on a wrist, a seal pressed into clay, a word borrowed from a foreign tongue. The merchants of the Indus may have understood something profound, that the sea is not a barrier, but a bridge, that horizons are invitations rather than limits. Under a star-marked sky, aboard a vessel rocking gently on dark water, a sailor might have stood alone at the bow. The wind would lift his hair, the sea would murmur in low tones. Ahead lay nothing but darkness and the promise of land unseen. He would not know that thousands of years later his journey would be pieced together from fragments, that scholars would speak of Meluha in careful tones, that beads he carried would rest beneath glass, glowing like embers in still air. He would only know the rhythm of waves, the slow rise and fall beneath his feet, the quiet companionship of stars overhead. As night deepens now, we imagine that same horizon, endless, patient, veiled. No ship crosses it, no sail breaks its line, only the sea breathing in its ancient cadence. Perhaps the merchants were never meant to leave monuments. Perhaps their story was meant to drift, to disperse, to be found in fragments. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. The beads still glow, the seals still bear their silent script. The clay tablets in distant lands still whisper the name Meluha. And the sea continues its patient rhythm, marked by the moon, touched by stars. Waves fold over one another in slow spirals. The shoreline rests in quiet shadow. The ports of the Indus lie buried and crumbled, their docks returned to dust. Yet somewhere within the vastness of water and sky, the memory of movement remains, a reminder that even vanished civilizations once touched horizons beyond their sight. The dawn that follows is gentle. Light spreads across the oceanic surface without spectacle. The horizon softens. The sea does not explain itself. It simply continues. And in that continuation, in that endless exchange between water and sky, we sense the merchants still, not as names, not as statues, but as breath carried across distance, as quiet hands guiding a vessel toward a distant waiting shore. Within a vast brick chamber, beneath a ceiling long surrendered to sky, there lies a silence so complete it almost hums. It is said that once, in this place, grain rested in careful abundance. Wheat and barley gathered from fields that stretched beyond the horizon, brought here in woven sacks and poured into waiting space. The air would have been warm with the scent of harvest, dry, golden, touched by sun. Now there is only wind, moving softly through broken walls. We enter as though stepping into a forgotten sanctuary. The floor is raised upon brick platforms, aligned with quiet precision. The walls, though crumbled in places, still suggest enclosure. Some believe these were granaries, storehouses built not for spectacle, but for sustenance. Here, the city gathered its future in the form of seed. Imagine it full. Grain lies in gentle mounds like captured sunlight, each kernel small, oval, unassuming. Yet together they form a sea of gold. The chamber hums with quiet labor, footsteps crossing the brick floor, the rustle of sackcloth, the murmur of voices planning for seasons yet to come. In forgotten corners of the earth, civilizations rose not on stone alone, but on seed. Before walls were built, before streets were aligned, there was soil turned by hand and water guided into furrow. The people of the Indus Valley understood this deeply. They coaxed life from earth without carving their triumph into monuments. They trusted the rhythm of planting and return. It is said that their fields were fed by rivers that swelled with monsoon breath. Canals may have guided water gently into cultivated land. The soil, enriched by seasonal floods, yielded grain that sustained the city through uncertain months. Within this storehouse, time itself seemed to slow. Grain does not shout, it waits. It carries within its fragile body the promise of another harvest. A single kernel, buried in soil, becomes many. And so abundance grows quietly, without spectacle. We wander through the chamber now, where only shadow pools between brick platforms. The roof has long since fallen. Sky opens above like a vast and patient witness. Wind moves in soft spirals, carrying dust where once golden mounds rose. It is easy to imagine the trust that filled this space. Trust in rain, trust in river, trust that the seed saved today would feed tomorrow's children. The act of storing grain is an act of faith, a belief in continuity, in cycles, in the gentle return of what has been sown. Some believe that the Indus civilization was marked by such quiet foresight. Their cities revealed drainage systems, standardized bricks, wells descending into cool darkness, order without boast, preparation without proclamation. The granary, if this is what it was, stands as a testament to that quiet planning. Not a palace for kings, not a temple for display, but a chamber for sustenance, a sanctuary for seed. And yet beneath the silence a shift may have begun. Rivers that once overflowed their banks might have grown unpredictable. Monsoons could have thinned, arriving later or not at all. Climate, slow and merciless, may have altered the delicate balance between water and soil. It is said that drought does not arrive with trumpet or flame. It seeps in quietly. Year by year, harvests may have grown smaller. The golden mounds within this chamber thinner. The trust that once filled the air touched by uncertainty. Imagine a season when the sacks carried into the storehouse are lighter than before, the rustle of grain softer, the mounds less high. Elders gather in the fading light, their voices low. There is no panic, only calculation. How long will this last? How much must be saved? Which fields should be planted next season? The grain waits in silence. There is no record of dramatic pleas to unseen gods carved into stone, no inscription marking catastrophe, only the gradual thinning visible in archaeology, fewer signs of abundance, subtle shifts in settlement patterns. Some believe the rivers shifted course, withdrawing from fields that once flourished. Others whisper of tectonic tremors altering the flow of water, leaving once fertile land cracked and dry. The earth, generous and indifferent, continued its slow transformations. Within this chamber, grain may have dwindled. Families might have stood in the doorway, looking out across fields where water once sang. The soil now harder beneath bare feet, the air heavier with dust. Children ask quiet questions. Elders answer with measured calm. It is said that the Indus people did not collapse in a single night of fire. They dispersed gently, following water where it flowed more faithfully. Villages grew in new places. Seeds were carried in small pouches, tied at the waist or tucked into woven bags. The storehouse emptied not in chaos, but in departure. One by one, sacks were lifted and carried elsewhere. The chamber that once hummed with quiet abundance grew hollow. Wind found its way through open doorways. Dust settled where golden grain had rested. Where memory fades, brick remains. We stand in the granary now, centuries later. The platforms still rise from the earth in steady alignment. Their geometry suggests intention. Even without grain, they speak of preparation. The absence feels sacred. A single kernel imagined in the palm carries immense weight. It is small enough to slip between fingers, light enough to be blown by breath. And yet, from such fragility, cities rise. From such simplicity, streets are built and wells are dug. From such modest beginnings, civilization takes shape. Perhaps that is the quiet lesson held within these crumbled walls. That grandeur begins in small things. That abundance is gathered grain by grain. That endurance depends not on monument, but on seed. The earth does not grieve when a city fades. It continues its cycles. Seasons turn. Rain falls in one place and withholds in another. New shoots push through soil where old fields once lay abandoned. It is said that the earth is both indifferent and generous. The Indus people may have understood this. They did not carve dramatic records of drought. They did not erect statues in defiance of failing rain. They followed water. They carried seed. They trusted that life would continue elsewhere. As night deepens, we imagine the granary beneath moonlight. The broken walls glow pale. Shadows stretch across the brick platforms. Wind moves softly through the open roof, stirring dust in delicate spirals. The chamber no longer hums with harvest. It hums with stillness. The grain that once waited here has long since returned to soil, sprouted, eaten, scattered, dissolved. And yet, in the quiet of imagination, we hold a single kernel, its surface smooth, its form unassuming. Within it rests the memory of fields, of rivers, of careful hands gathering at dusk. Within it rests the potential for another cycle, another settlement, another quiet city aligned beneath a patient sky. Civilization can rise from such small things, and it can fade just as quietly. Perhaps the storehouse was never meant to endure forever. Perhaps it was meant to serve its season, then soften back into earth. The bricks crumble, the platforms sink, dust settles where abundance once waited. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. In this chamber, the echo is gentle, a reminder that survival is sacred, that preparation is devotion, that seed is both beginning and end. The wind moves again, carrying fine grains of sand across the floor. They gather in shallow drifts against brick. The moon shifts higher, its light sliding across the chamber like a pale hand. Beyond the walls, the earth continues its slow breathing. Somewhere, fields are being planted. Somewhere, grain ripens under sun. Somewhere, a child cups a handful of wheat and watches it spill back into waiting soil. The granary stands open to sky. It holds no grain now, only memory. And beneath the silence, beneath the dust, beneath the crumbled brick, the promise of seed remains, quiet, enduring, waiting for another cycle beyond our knowing. In a chamber of soft shadow, where dust hangs in a thin column of amber light, a small seal rests upon a stone table. It is no larger than a folded palm. Its surface is pale, worn smooth by centuries of stillness, and upon it, carved with deliberate care, stands a creature with a single horn, the so-called unicorn of the Indus. It does not rear, it does not charge. It stands in profile, composed and almost solemn. Its body resembles that of a bull, sturdy, grounded, yet from its brow rises a long, straight horn, tapering toward the unseen. Above its back, a row of unreadable symbols curves in quiet formation, like stars arranged in a forgotten constellation. It is said that hundreds of such seals have been found, in crumbled streets, beneath collapsed walls, in layers of earth where brick has returned to dust. Across vast distances of the Indus realm, this same figure appears again and again. The repetition feels deliberate, almost devotional. We lean closer in imagination. The horn is etched with a line so precise it seems to hum. The animal's eye is calm, neither fierce nor timid. It gazes forward into something beyond the boundary of stone. What was this creature to those who carved it? In forgotten corners of the earth, symbols often outlive the stories that birthed them. We inherit the shape, but not the sound. The unicorn of the Indus remains suspended between familiarity and strangeness, recognizable, yet unreachable. Some believe it was a deity, a sacred beast invoked in ritual, perhaps linked to water, fertility, or celestial rhythm. Others suggest it was a clan emblem, marking goods that traveled across river and sea. A sign of belonging pressed into damp clay like a quiet signature. Whispers tell us that perhaps it was neither god nor mere mark of trade, but something in between, a guardian of exchange, a watcher over movement, a silent witness to promises made in marketplaces and along docks. The seal, when pressed into clay, would have left its impression in mirror image, the unicorn reversed, its horn pointing toward earth instead of sky. That impression would then seal a jar of grain, a bundle of beads, a letter carried across distance. And so the creature traveled, not in flesh, but in form, not in legend, but in imprint. We drift now into the artisan quarters of an ancient city, perhaps Mohenjo-Daro, perhaps Harappa, where seals were carved with steady hands. The room is small, its walls of brick holding the day's warmth. A single lamp flickers, casting slow shadows across tools and stone. An artisan sits cross-legged, a block of steatite resting in his palm. He studies its surface as one might study a horizon before sunrise. The carving is not hurried. Each incision is a quiet act of meaning. The horn must be straight, the body proportioned, the symbols above arranged in precise order. Outside, the city breathes. Footsteps along lined streets, the distant sound of water drawn from a well. Within, the only sound is the gentle scrape of tool against stone. It is said that these seals were not random decorations. Their symbols repeat across settlements separated by rivers and plains, a shared language of form, a unity of mark. Bulls appear, heavy with muscle. Elephants, their trunks curved like flowing water. Tigers, striped with strength. And among them, the unicorn, more frequent than all others. Why this creature? Some scholars have suggested that the unicorn may not have been mythical at all, but a stylized bull viewed in profile, its two horns rendered as one. Others argue that its singular horn is too deliberate to be an accident, that it represents something unseen in the physical world. Perhaps the unicorn was less a beast and more a bridge. A bridge between known and imagined. Between the earthly animal and the celestial symbol, its horn rises straight and unwavering, like a pillar connecting ground to sky. In a civilization without overt kings, without monumental statues proclaiming dominance, the unicorn may have served as a quiet emblem of unity, a shared guardian across cities bound by river and rhythm rather than by throne. And yet, we do not know. No scroll explains its myth. No inscription beneath its hooves tells of origin. The script above it remains undeciphered, a veil drawn gently across intention. Beneath the silence, we sense that the unicorn meant something intimate, something understood by those who pressed it into clay, something felt rather than declared. Imagine a merchant sealing a jar before departure. He presses the carved stone into soft clay. The unicorn appears in relief, horn sharp, body poised. Above it, the symbols affirm identity. The jar is secured, the mark is made. This impression travels across water and sand, carrying with it a fragment of shared meaning. To the one who sees it in a distant land, the mark speaks without words. Perhaps the unicorn stood for trust, for the promise that goods were authentic, that trade was fair, that origin was honored. In a world where exchange depended on relationship rather than written contract, such symbols may have carried weight beyond their size. And yet, the creature remains silent. Centuries pass. The cities thin. The seals are buried beneath layers of collapse and wind-blown dust. The horn that once gleamed in lamplight rests now in darkness. Archaeologists uncover them gently, brushing away soil with patient hands. The unicorn emerges again into light, unchanged in form, unchanged in mystery. It does not reveal its secret. In the quiet of a museum chamber beneath soft illumination, the seal lies behind glass. Visitors lean close. They see the creature's outline. They read the small placard describing it as Indus unicorn, and they move on. But the seal remains. Its horn still points toward something we cannot hear. Where memory fades, symbol persists. Perhaps the unicorn was never meant to gallop into legend. Perhaps it was meant to stand, steady, unhurried, ambiguous, a presence rather than a proclamation. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. In the stillness of night, imagine holding the seal in your palm. Feel its cool weight. Trace the curve of the horn with your fingertip. Let the unreadable symbols above it rest in your gaze. You do not need to solve it. You do not need to decode its script. Allow the not knowing to soften into acceptance. The unicorn does not charge forward demanding explanation. It simply stands, grounded, balanced, patient in its ambiguity. Its horn rises like a quiet axis, a line between earth and sky. Perhaps the emblem was never meant to be translated into our language. Perhaps it guarded its own secret deliberately, holding within it a story that belongs only to the rhythm of that ancient civilization. As night settles over the imagined city, the artisan's lamp fades. The seal is set aside. The workshop grows still. The unicorn rests. Wind moves softly through broken walls where the city once thrived. Dust drifts in slow spirals beneath a star-marked sky. The seal lies buried once more in the earth of memory. And somewhere between animal and symbol, between stone and story, the unicorn remains. Not a creature of conquest or fantasy, but a quiet guardian of meaning we may never fully hear. In that silence, there is a strange peace, the acceptance that some emblems are meant to guard their own secrets. The horn points forward into darkness, and we, standing at the edge of that mystery, feel no urgency to chase it. We simply watch and listen, and let the unicorn remain, ancient, sacred, veiled, beneath the patient gaze of the moon. From above, from a height no ancient eye could have claimed, yet which imagination allows, the city appears like a quiet diagram resting upon the earth. Straight avenues cross at gentle right angles, narrow lanes branch with intention, blocks repeat in calm proportion, like verses in a poem whose rhythm is steady and unhurried. There is no chaos in their arrangement, no wandering sprawl, only geometry laid softly across dust and river plain. It is said that when the ruins of the Indus cities were first traced from the air, their order revealed itself in silence, not in towering monuments or vast pyramids, but in alignment, in the way streets met one another with quiet certainty, in the way brick followed brick with measured grace. Imagine that vision now. The sun lowers itself beyond the horizon. Twilight settles like a veil across the ancient plain. The grid of streets glows faintly in the last amber light. From above, the city resembles a woven pattern, threads of clay intersecting in calm precision. Who guided this unseen hand? In forgotten corners of the earth, order often arises from decree, from kings who command, from architects whose names are carved into stone. Yet here, no royal proclamation survives. No inscription declares, "I planned these streets." The governance, if it existed, remains veiled. We descend from the imagined sky and enter the city at ground level. The air is cool. Brick walls line either side of the avenue. Each brick is uniform in size, proportioned with quiet care. They fit together as if part of a single intention carried across generations. The surface beneath our feet is firm, level, unbroken by accident. Beneath the silence, something flows. Hidden beneath these straight streets were drainage systems, channels carefully laid to carry water and waste away from homes. Covered and concealed, they speak of foresight, of an understanding that order is not merely visible, but also unseen. Water would have moved beneath the city like a secret pulse. It is said that such planning suggests governance, a collective agreement, a shared philosophy of living. Yet there is no throne room here, no palace dominating the skyline, no grand statue casting a long shadow over modest homes. The order does not oppress, it feels practical, almost humble. We walk slowly down an imagined avenue at twilight. Footsteps echo softly against brick. The sound is contained, gentle. To our left, a doorway opens into a courtyard where a well descends in spiral into shadow. To our right, another home mirrors the proportions of the first. Balance is everywhere, but it is not rigid. It is breathable. Some believe that this alignment may have reflected spiritual harmony, that the geometry of the city mirrored a cosmic order, that straight lines and right angles were not merely practical, but sacred, a way of aligning daily life with celestial rhythm. Others suggest a simpler wisdom, that such design arose from collective living, from the understanding that when homes align, when water flows cleanly, when streets meet predictably, life becomes more harmonious. Perhaps both are true. In ancient times, the boundary between practical and sacred was not sharply drawn. To lay a brick with care may have been an act of devotion. To ensure water drained properly may have been an offering to health and continuity. As we wander deeper, we notice the repetition. Brick after brick, wall after wall, the same proportion echoes. Standardization speaks of unity, of agreement across vast distances. The cities of the Indus, though separated by river and plain, share this quiet geometry. Whispers tell us that such consistency suggests communication, a shared measure, a common understanding of how to build, how to dwell. Yet the measure itself remains unnamed. No scroll explains the philosophy. No text describes the intention behind each aligned street. Where memory fades, alignment remains. Imagine the city at its height. Morning light spills down the avenues, casting long, even shadows. Merchants set out goods in orderly fashion. Children run along predictable paths, their laughter contained by straight walls. Water flows beneath, unseen but reliable. There is a calm efficiency to this world. And yet, it does not feel mechanical. It feels human. A woman sweeps the threshold of her home, dust gathering into small spirals. A man repairs a brick where time has worn it thin. Neighbors greet one another in passing, their movements guided gently by the city's design. The streets do not confuse, they do not intimidate, they offer clarity. What philosophy guided this invisible order? Was it born of necessity, the practical need to manage water in a land shaped by monsoon and river? Or did it arise from a deeper belief that harmony in structure invites harmony in life? In forgotten corners of the earth, some cultures build upward in monument, seeking to touch the sky with stone. The Indus people built outward in balance, spreading evenly across the plain. Their absence of grand monuments is itself a statement. They valued function over display, infrastructure over spectacle, the unseen channel beneath the street over the towering idol. As centuries pass in imagination, we feel a subtle shift. Doors remain closed longer, courtyards grow quieter, the hum of daily life softens. Perhaps the river's rhythm altered, perhaps trade thinned, perhaps climate shifted in ways too slow to perceive at first. The decline, if it came, did not shatter the grid. The straight lines persisted, even as houses emptied. Imagine walking these streets now. The same avenues stretch before us, but no voices echo, no smoke rises from rooftops, the drainage channels lie dry. Wind moves through abandoned doorways, stirring dust in pale spirals. The geometry remains. It is almost tender in its endurance. Even in abandonment, the city holds its shape. The right angles still meet precisely. The bricks, though crumbled at edges, retain their proportion. Order persists amid absence. It is said that geometry does not prevent impermanence. Even the most carefully measured world must soften into dust. And yet, There is something profoundly moving in the persistence of alignment, as if memory itself were etched into clay, as if the earth remembers the lines drawn upon it. We stand at a crossroads in the fading light. 4 streets extend outward in perfect angles. The sky above deepens into indigo. Stars begin to appear, one by one, marking the vastness beyond human design. The grid beneath us seems to mirror that celestial order. Lines meeting lines, points intersecting with quiet certainty. Perhaps the builders sensed this reflection. Perhaps they saw in the stars a pattern worth echoing on earth. Or perhaps they simply understood that clarity invites calm. As night settles fully, the streets fade into shadow. Dust gathers where footsteps once fell. Wind whispers along brick, carrying fine grains across aligned avenues. The city does not resist its own softening. It yields gently. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. In the stillness of these streets, we hear a quiet whisper. That harmony, however brief, once lived here. That order need not shout. That structure can serve life without dominating it. The lines of the city blur at their edges, merging with surrounding earth. Yet in imagination, they remain clear. A testament not to empire, but to balance. The twilight deepens. The grid rests beneath a star-marked sky, patient and veiled. The unseen hand that once guided brick and channel is gone, returned to dust. But its intention lingers in alignment, and as sleep approaches, we sense that even in impermanence there can be harmony, even in fading there can be form. The streets dissolve slowly into night, geometry softens, dust settles, and somewhere beneath the silence, the quiet order of that ancient city continues to whisper, not of conquest or glory, but of a world once measured gently and lived within with care. At the edge of a silent desert, beneath a sky washed pale by moonlight, a dry channel curves across the land like a forgotten vein. It is said that once, long before sand gathered in these shallow depressions, water flowed here in quiet abundance. A river, perhaps the Saraswati, or a river like it, moved with patient grace beside the settlements of the Indus realm. Its current carried silt and reflection, fish and memory. Its banks were lined with reeds that whispered in evening wind. Now there is only dust. The channel lies empty, a pale scar upon the earth. No ripple disturbs its bed. No boats rock against its edge, and yet beneath the silence something lingers, the echo of water that once sang. We begin with this image. Water altering its path, slipping away from familiar banks without announcement. Not in a single violent flood, not in a sudden collapse, but in a slow withdrawal, as if the river had grown restless and chosen another course. In forgotten corners of the earth, rivers are both cradle and compass. They shape settlement, guide trade, nourish fields. To live beside a river is to trust its rhythm, to believe that tomorrow it will still be there, glinting beneath dawn. But rivers are ancient, and their loyalty belongs to gravity, not to cities. Satellite images in our time reveal ghostly lines beneath the desert, faint, winding traces of what may have been ancient riverbeds. Channels buried beneath sand, visible only from above. They curve with a softness that suggests water's former touch. These are the veins of a landscape that once breathed differently. If a river withdrew, what choice did its people have but to follow? Imagine the first subtle signs. A well that must be lowered a little deeper than before. The rope extended by a hand's breadth, the bucket returning not quite as full. Fields at the edge of the settlement showing thin cracks between furrows. The air carrying less of that familiar dampness at dusk. It is said that drought does not always arrive in thunder. Sometimes it comes as hesitation, as a pause in rain that stretches one season longer than expected. We wander through an imagined village along that vanished river. Clay houses rest in gentle rows. Children play near the bank, their laughter mingling with the soft rush of current. Women wash cloth at water's edge, the surface breaking into small circles of reflected sky. Men guide simple boats loaded with grain, their hulls cutting quietly through silver light. The river is life. It feeds wells. It saturates fields. It offers fish and passage. It shapes myth. Whispers tell us that perhaps this was the Saraswati, a river praised in ancient hymns, later remembered in fragments of sacred verse. Or perhaps it was another name entirely, now lost beneath geological time. What matters is not the name, but the presence. Then, slowly, the current thins. The river's voice grows softer. Sandbars appear where water once ran deep. Boats scrape against shallow beds. Fishermen cast nets and draw them in with less weight. There is no immediate panic. People who live beside rivers understand fluctuation. Flood and retreat are part of the rhythm. They wait for the next monsoon, for the swell that will restore familiar fullness. But the swell does not come, or it comes weakly, insufficient to refill what has emptied. Some argue that tectonic shifts altered the river's course, redirecting its flow toward another basin. Others see climate's quiet hand, monsoon patterns shifting, rainfall migrating eastward. The earth, with its slow and merciless patience, reshaped the land. The truth remains veiled. We imagine the slow realization settling upon the settlement like evening fog. Wells must be deepened again. This time the rope strains. The bucket returns half full. Fields crack under a sun less forgiving. The reeds along the bank turn brittle, their whisper becoming a dry rustle. Boats rest uselessly upon sand. Children who once splashed at the river's edge now walk across its exposed bed, leaving footprints where fish once darted. Elders gather at dusk, their voices low, discussing what cannot be ignored. If the river has changed its course, must they change theirs? It is said that civilizations bound to water cannot command its return. They can build channels, guide flow, store abundance. But when the source withdraws, no decree can reverse it. Some voices in later centuries would speak of invasion, of foreign peoples pressing into the valley, of conflict and displacement. Others would point to climate, to the silent reshaping of Earth. Beneath the silence, the land itself tells a quieter story. The river's departure may have been gradual, stretching across generations. Families might have adapted, digging deeper wells, shifting fields closer to remaining moisture. Trade routes adjusted, settlements thinned, then came departure. Not as flight in terror, but as decision. Imagine families gathering belongings at dawn, clay vessels wrapped in cloth, seals and tools tucked into woven baskets, seeds carefully measured and carried, the bricks of their homes left to sun and wind. Doors are not barred. There is no time for ritual farewell. The riverbed lies open behind them, a wide, pale corridor where water once moved in shimmering lines. Where memory fades, sand gathers. Years pass. The abandoned settlement softens. Walls crumble. Streets fill with drifted dust. The riverbed becomes indistinguishable from surrounding desert, save for a subtle curve in the land. Wind moves through the empty channel in slow spirals, carrying grains of sand like tiny echoes of water's former flow. As night spreads over this dry bed, the poignancy of absence deepens. Under a star-marked sky, the channel glows faintly. It resembles a scar and a pathway at once. No ripple breaks its surface. No reflection of moonlight trembles in its depth. Yet beneath the sand, moisture may still linger, traces of the ancient current hidden from sight. Rivers are both lifelines and teachers. They offer sustenance, they invite settlement, they shape stories and identities. And then, in their ancient autonomy, they remind us of change. The people who once lived along this vanished river did not vanish with it. They moved, they adapted, they carried memory like a hidden spring within them. Perhaps they followed other waters, toward the Ganges plain, toward regions where rain still fell generously. Perhaps their descendants spoke of a lost river in hushed tones, turning memory into myth. It is said that some rivers continue to flow invisibly beneath sand and story, that the Saraswati may still move underground, hidden yet present. Whether this is truth or longing, it reflects a deep human desire that what nourished us once might not be entirely gone, but the earth is not bound to our desire. The old riverbed sleeps beneath sand. Its curves are visible only from the sky, like faint lines on an ancient palm. No boats rest there now, no nets are cast. And yet, in imagination, we hear the faintest echo of current. A sound so soft it could be wind, a memory so subtle it could be dream. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. As sleep approaches, we stand upon that dry channel beneath a vast and patient sky. The stars above mirror the invisible pathways beneath our feet. Both sky and earth hold lines we cannot fully trace. The river changed its course, the people moved on, the bricks of their settlements softened into dust, the wells filled with sand, the fields returned to wilderness, and the earth continues its slow reshaping, indifferent to our longing for permanence. Perhaps it was never meant to remain as it was. Perhaps the lesson of the river is not loss, but flow, that life gathers, nourishes, disperses, that what we build beside water is always temporary. The desert night deepens, the old channel lies quiet, marked by the moon, and somewhere beneath the silence, beneath sand and star, the memory of water lingers, not as command, not as promise, but as gentle reminder that even absence carries the echo of what once was. In a room lit only by a single trembling flame, a small figure rests upon a wooden table. It is made of clay, terracotta once warm and pliable beneath careful fingers. Now it is firm, cooled by centuries, its surface softened by time. The lamplight gathers along its curves, casting gentle shadows into the hollows of its eyes, along the swell of its form. It is said that such figures have been unearthed from the soil of the Indus cities. Small women with elaborate headdresses, animals poised in quiet stillness, forms that seem both intimate and distant. They emerge from earth as if rising from a long sleep, shaped by hands that have long since returned to dust. We begin with one such figure. It fits easily in the palm. Its features are simple, almost stylized. The face is serene, eyes suggested rather than defined. The body may be rounded, suggestive of fertility, of life held within. Or perhaps it is merely the shape of a human as understood through memory rather than mirror. Was this a goddess? Some believe these terracotta women represent mother figures, symbols of fertility and protection, guardians of birth and harvest. The repetition of certain forms suggests shared meaning, passed quietly from household to household. Others suggest a more ordinary explanation, that these were toys, tokens of affection, simple representations of daily life. The ambiguity wraps them in quiet mystery, like a veil drawn across a familiar face. In forgotten corners of the earth, devotion does not always rise in stone towers. Sometimes it settles near the hearth. We wander now through an imagined home in Mohenjo-daro. The courtyard is small but open to the sky. A well descends into shadow at one side. The walls are brick, measured and steady. In a corner near the hearth, upon a low shelf, stands a small clay figure. It has no temple. No priest attends it. It simply stands. A woman pauses before it at dusk, her hands dusted with flour. She adjusts its position slightly, perhaps brushing away ash that settled during the day. No grand ritual unfolds. Only a whispered hope, perhaps, for health, for safe childbirth, for steady harvest. Clay, once pliable and warm, hardened into lasting presence. The figure absorbs the room's quiet rhythms, the crackle of fire, the murmur of conversation, the soft breathing of sleeping children. It witnesses small griefs and gentle joys. It stands in stillness as seasons pass. It is said that sacredness in the Indus world may not have been monumental, No towering temple has been found bearing carved hymns or statues of gods in triumph. If there was devotion, it may have lived in kitchens and courtyards rather than in vast ceremonial halls. The figurine, humble and small, becomes a focal point of attention, not because it commands it, but because it invites it. Perhaps it was held during prayer. Perhaps a child traced its contours while listening to stories of ancestors. Perhaps it was placed beside a newborn as silent guardian. The animals too, small bulls, delicate birds, forms shaped with gentle exaggeration, suggest a world attentive to the living earth. The Indus people knew the rhythms of cattle and crop, of monsoon and drought. To shape an animal in clay may have been an act of recognition, of reverence, and yet we do not know their myths. No scroll remains to tell us what names they whispered to these figures. No inscription explains whether the rounded form was Divine Mother or cherished doll. Beneath the silence, the figurines hold their own story. We imagine an artisan shaping clay at the edge of a courtyard. The earth is damp and cool between fingers. A small ball is rolled, pressed, coaxed into form. A face emerges not from perfection, but from familiarity. The maker has seen many faces, mother, sister, neighbor, and memory guides the shaping. The clay figure dries in sun. Later, it is placed near the hearth, near the place where bread rises and smoke curls upward in thin spirals. It becomes part of the household's quiet constellation. It is said that clay remembers touch, the warmth of hands that shaped it, the imprint of fingerprints pressed gently into its surface. Even when hardened by fire, it carries the memory of breath. When the cities thinned and families departed, these figurines remained. They were left on shelves, perhaps knocked to the floor as walls softened. They fell into cracks between bricks. Soil gathered around them, year by year. Sand drifted in. The houses collapsed, their contents swallowed by earth. The figurines were cradled by soil. Centuries passed, roots grew around them, rain seeped through layers of dust. The clay, once shaped with care, endured quietly in darkness. When archaeologists unearthed them, brushing soil away with patient hands, the figures emerged unchanged in expression. Their faces, though simple, seemed to gaze outward as if from another time. They endure without explanation. In a museum chamber, beneath soft and steady light, one such figurine rests behind glass. Visitors pass. Some pause, some move on. The label may read, "Female figurine, terracotta, Indus Valley." But the label cannot hold the tenderness that may have once surrounded it. Where memory fades, form remains. We return in imagination to the lamplit room. The small clay figure stands once more upon a shelf. A mother sits nearby, her back against the wall. A child sleeps in her lap. Outside, wind moves along the straight streets of the city, whispering against brick. She lifts the figurine gently and holds it in her palm. Perhaps she does not think of it as goddess or symbol. Perhaps she simply finds comfort in its presence, in the way its form mirrors her own, in the way it stands upright and steady. Sacredness need not be monumental. Sometimes it fits in the palm. Sometimes it is shaped from earth and breath, from the simple act of forming clay into something that feels alive. It is said that devotion often lives in small gestures, in the lighting of a lamp, in the placement of an object, in the whisper of hope spoken into quiet air. The Indus figurines carry that possibility within them. As night deepens over the imagined city, the hearth dims. The clay figure returns to its place on the shelf. The room grows still. Outside, the grid of streets rests beneath a star-marked sky. The figurine does not glow. It does not move. It simply remains. Centuries later, buried and forgotten, it waits again in darkness. Soil presses gently around its form. Time flows like an unseen river above. And then, in another age, it rises once more into light. Its face softened by dust, its body intact. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. The terracotta figure, silent and veiled, speaks not in words but in presence. It reminds us that the sacred may dwell not in towering shrines, but in kitchens, in courtyards, in the quiet corners of daily life. As sleep approaches, we imagine holding such a figure in our own palm, its surface cool, its shape simple, its origin ancient and tender. We do not ask it to reveal its secret. We simply feel its weight, light yet enduring. The lamplight fades, the figurine returns to shadow, and within its small form, shaped from earth and breath, lingers a quiet reminder. That meaning does not always announce itself in grandeur. Sometimes it rests softly in the hand, patient as clay, carrying within it a tenderness we cannot fully name. There is no single layer of ash, no blackened wall frozen in flame, no battlefield caught mid-cry, no shattered gate splintered by siege. Instead, there is a door left slightly open. It stands in a brick wall beneath a wide and patient sky. The threshold is unbroken, the hinges show no violence. Wind moves through the doorway in a slow and absent-minded way, carrying fine dust across a floor once swept by careful hands. This is how we begin, with the unsettling calm of abandonment. It is said that when archaeologists uncovered the cities of the Indus, Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, and others whose names feel like breath against stone, they did not find the dramatic end they expected. No mass graves stacked in haste, no thick burn layer sealing a final catastrophe. Instead, they found emptiness, streets still aligned, wells still descending into shadow, rooms intact, though hollow. The quiet is almost sacred. In forgotten corners of the earth, we are accustomed to endings written in fire. Empires fall with thunder, conquests carve new names into old stone. History often favors spectacle, the clash of armies, the blaze of destruction. But here, there is no spectacle, only absence. We wander slowly through one of these cities at dusk. The sky is copper and soft. The straight streets glow faintly beneath the lowering sun. A courtyard lies open to air. A small clay vessel rests overturned near a wall, not shattered, simply left behind. Footsteps echo in imagination, though no one walks. Evidence suggests dispersal rather than destruction. The great urban centers thinned. Populations shifted eastward, toward regions where rivers still flowed generously. Settlements grew smaller. Rural life expanded. The pattern of dense city blocks softened into scattered villages. It feels less like collapse and more like retreat. But retreat can carry its own dignity. Imagine a gathering of elders beneath a fading sky. They sit upon woven mats in a courtyard where a well reflects the first stars. Their faces are lined not with panic, but with understanding. The river has shifted. The harvest has grown uncertain. Trade routes have quieted. There is no enemy at the gate, only change. It is said that sometimes the strongest act is not to defend a structure, but to release it. We imagine the decision unfolding slowly, across seasons rather than days, families weighing memory against survival, children playing still in the streets, unaware that their world is thinning. Wells drawn from deeper and deeper, storehouses less full than before. No proclamation announces departure. There is no final ceremony beneath a grand temple, no decree carved into stone declaring the end of an age. Instead, belongings are gathered quietly. A woman wraps a small terracotta figurine in cloth. A man lifts a carved seal and slips it into a pouch at his waist. Seeds are measured carefully into bags. Water vessels are filled for the journey. Doors are left unbarred, not because they expect return, but because there is nothing left to guard. Whispers tell us that communities moved gradually, some remaining longer than others. The great cities did not empty in a single breath. They exhaled slowly, over generations. Each departure was small, a family here, a workshop there, a street growing quieter. The grid remained even as voices faded. We walk along one of those streets in imagination. The drainage channels still lie hidden beneath the surface. The bricks still hold their careful proportion. The geometry that once guided daily life persists, even as the life itself drifts away. There is something profoundly human in this quiet leaving. No empire declared their fall. No foreign king etched his triumph into their walls. They simply became something else. It is said that the people of the Indus did not vanish. They dispersed. Their bloodlines merged with other communities. Their knowledge of brick-making, drainage, agriculture and trade diffused like breath into wider lands. Civilization did not end. It transformed. Where memory fades, influence remains. Imagine children walking eastward beside their parents. Dust rises gently around their feet. They carry small bundles tied with cord. The sun is high but not harsh. They do not know they are leaving history behind. They know only that water lies ahead. The elders walk slowly but steadily. There is grief, perhaps, but not despair. The wells of their childhood will remain. The streets that shaped their steps will stand beneath sky. The city does not beg them to stay. It rests. History often teaches us to expect drama, to look for the clash, the blaze, the cry of defeat. But here we encounter something quieter, absence without violence. This quiet departure challenges our expectations. Could a civilization choose to soften rather than shatter? Could strength take the form of walking away? In forgotten corners of the earth, survival is sometimes more sacred than pride. The Indus cities, left to wind and dust, did not accuse their people of abandonment. They simply stood as husks beneath open sky. Centuries passed. Wind moved through empty doorways. Sand gathered along once-swept thresholds. Roofs collapsed gently inward. Wells filled with silt. The straight streets remained visible long after footsteps ceased. Archaeologists would one day walk those same streets, marveling at their order. They would search for signs of war and find none conclusive. They would speak of climate, of rivers changing course, of economic shifts. The truth, like so much of the Indus world, remains veiled. But the silence speaks. As night settles over the abandoned city, the stars appear one by one. They shine upon crumbled walls and open courtyards, just as they once shone upon living faces. The absence is not empty. It is full of unspoken resilience. To leave without war is a different kind of strength. To choose survival over spectacle is a quiet form of wisdom. The people who walked away did not vanish into nothingness. They carried their knowledge with them: how to shape brick, how to manage water, how to align streets with invisible order. They carried seeds, stories, and ways of living, their identity diffused like breath across a wider landscape. Perhaps that was always their way, not to dominate, but to integrate. Not to erect monuments to permanence, but to move with the shifting rhythm of river and rain. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. In the stillness of these abandoned streets, we hear not the roar of defeat, but the hush of endurance. The city stands as testament not to destruction, but to transformation. The door remains slightly open. Wind passes through. Moonlight settles across brick, tracing the same straight lines that once guided daily life. The geometry holds, even as the human presence dissolves into time. Perhaps it was never meant to end in fire. Perhaps it was meant to fade like dusk, gradually, gently, without spectacle. As sleep approaches, we stand at the edge of one such empty street. The sky above is vast and star-marked. The ground beneath is firm, still aligned with care. The silence feels almost intentional, as if the city itself chose not to dramatize its departure. The people walked away. The cities remained. And in that quiet separation, there is dignity. Not every ending must burn. Some simply exhale. And beneath the silence, beneath the dust, beneath the open sky, the resilience of those who left continues to breathe, diffused, veiled, and enduring. The valley rests beneath starlight. Night has folded itself gently over the plains, and the ruins lie quiet beneath a vast and patient sky. Broken walls glow pale in moonlight. Dust drifts in slow spirals across streets that once knew the rhythm of footsteps. Wind moves softly through doorways without doors, carrying no message, only breath. It is said that when darkness settles over the Indus Valley, the land remembers, not in words, not in proclamation, but in stillness. We stand at the edge of a crumbled city, where brick meets shadow and silence deepens into something almost sacred. The straight streets we once wandered now fade into silver-grey lines beneath the moon. Wells descend into darkness, holding nothing but cool air. The great bath rests empty, reflecting only stars. The valley sleeps, and all the mysteries gather here. The script that no one could hear. The unicorn poised beneath unreadable signs. The wells aligned with quiet precision. The river that changed its course. The people who walked away, they rest together now beneath this celestial canopy, as if the night itself were a great chamber holding them in patient suspension. In forgotten corners of the earth, some civilizations leave behind grand conclusions, monuments to victory or ruins scorched by flame. But here in this valley, certainty remains distant. We have wandered through brick platforms where grain once lay like captured sunlight. We have descended into cool wells where water shimmered like held breath. We have traced seals and figurines shaped by hands long returned to dust. Yet explanation evades us. It is said that perhaps this is the valley's quiet gift, to dwell within incomplete knowledge, to sit beside mystery without demanding its surrender. The wind moves again, brushing against a wall that once framed a doorway. Moonlight settles along its edge, illuminating cracks that resemble fine lines upon an aged palm. The brick does not resist its softening, it yields gently to time. As starlight touches ancient stone, we feel the presence of those who once walked these streets, not as names carved in monument, but as breath returned to earth. Imagine the city at night, in its living days. Lanterns flicker in courtyards. The scent of cooking grain rises into warm air. A child laughs and is hushed softly by a mother's hand. Somewhere, a seal is pressed into clay. Somewhere, water is drawn from a well. Somewhere, a figurine stands near a hearth, absorbing whispered hope. Then imagine that same night, centuries later. No lanterns, no voices, only wind. The grid of streets persists, though softened. The alignment remains, though blurred at the edges. Geometry rests quietly upon earth, no longer serving daily life, but still testifying to its existence. Some believe that civilizations are remembered best through their endings. The blaze, the conquest, the dramatic fall. Yet the Indus Valley resists such framing. Not every story ends in fire. Some fade like twilight. Their edges dissolve into larger rhythms, into migration, into adaptation, into the quiet merging of cultures. The river hums beyond hearing. Though its ancient course may have shifted, though its name may have changed, water continues to move somewhere beneath this land. Perhaps underground, perhaps far to the east, perhaps only in memory. Where memory fades, the earth continues its slow breathing. The stars above do not change for us. They shone upon the Indus cities at their height. They shone when the wells were drawn from and the streets were full. They shone when families gathered their belongings and walked away. They shine now. Marked by the moon, the valley holds its silence without bitterness. We wander once more in imagination, past the great bath, now a chamber of shadow, along a street aligned with invisible order, into a courtyard where a well opens to sky. All that we have encountered rests within this night. The undeciphered script waits patiently beneath glass and desert alike. The unicorn remains poised, its horn pointing toward a story we cannot hear. The figurines lie cradled by soil, their faces softened but intact. It is said that sacredness does not demand explanation. Perhaps the Indus Valley teaches us this gently, that a civilization may be honored not for spectacle, but for balance, not for dramatic collapse, but for measured life. Its people mastered water without boasting of dominion. They aligned streets without carving the name of a king into stone. They built wells and baths and drainage channels, ensuring daily life flowed smoothly. And when change came, whether by river's retreat or climate's quiet hand, they moved, they adapted, they became something else. The valley does not shout its story, it whispers. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. As sleep approaches, we stand beneath the vast canopy of stars. The air is cool, the wind gentle. The ruins seem less like remnants and more like resting forms, as if the city itself has chosen to lie down. The bricks glow faintly in moonlight, their edges softened into pale lines against dark earth. Dust glimmers like fine stardust along the ground. We sense no accusation here, no regret, only a quiet presence. Perhaps it was never meant to be fully found. Perhaps the script was meant to remain partially veiled. Perhaps the absence of kings and battlefields was intentional, a reminder that human life need not be dramatic to be meaningful. The valley sleeps, not in oblivion, but in sacred uncertainty. Beneath the silence, the memory of measured streets and careful wells persists like a faint hum. The people who once walked here are not names in stone, but breath returned to soil, diffused into wider lands. Their knowledge flowed outward, their bloodlines intertwined. Their quiet order left an imprint upon history, even if their script remains unread. We do not need to solve them tonight. We only need to listen. The stars above seem closer now, as if leaning down to witness this resting place. The sky stretches endlessly, veiled and patient, and in that vastness, the valley feels small, yet complete. The river hums beyond hearing, the wind moves through broken walls, the dust settles. The past has chosen silence over explanation, and perhaps that is enough. As the night deepens and the ruins fade further into shadow, we feel acceptance soften around us like a gentle cloak. Not every mystery is meant to be unraveled. Not every civilization is meant to end in flame. Some live carefully. Some leave quietly. Some sleep beneath starlight. The valley rests. And we, standing at the edge of its silence, are left in sacred uncertainty, listening to a past that does not demand our understanding, only our reverence. The stars keep their slow watch. The earth breathes, and the Indus Valley, ancient and veiled, continues to sleep beneath the endless sky.